You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Overhead Wire, sponsored by our generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by Han Solo. That's right, the man with the Wookiee. I got some Buffalo Trace bourbon cream in here today. It's 11 p.m. How is everybody doing this week? Everybody out there getting vaccinated? I know that I'm waiting patiently for my turn. I've been hearing about a lot of folks who are getting theirs. I get a text every once in a while from friends saying, I've got my vaccine. Are you ready to get yours? And I'm like, yes, I am ready to get mine. So I'm excited to hear that more and more people are getting taken care of and being safe, and keep those masks on for a while for me, please, until we get the vaccine, until everybody gets it. Everybody has an opportunity to get that. So please do that. I know for me, I'm freaked out by needles, man. They're just not my favorite thing, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to talk my way into it, get over there and take care of it. I'm feeling pretty good today, actually. Monday is always a bit of a tiring day. There's lots of stuff going on. Over the weekend, I watched a lot of basketball. Love the March Madness, except when my team loses. Dang you, Abilene Christian, for dashing those Longhorn dreams. But we've got a good show today, so lots of things to talk about. A couple of items. We're not going to expand upon but something that should get a little bit of attention. We've been talking a lot about Secretary Buttigieg and his kind of whirlwind tour. We're not going to talk a ton about that, but I want to just kind of make some mention of what he's been up to. We seem to talk about this every time, and he's saying all the right things. This time he was at South by Southwest, technically in Austin, but people are zooming in from everywhere these days. Makes me think, though, people are going to be able to give speeches from anywhere. Are the spots for the conference speakers going to dry up for folks that are usually out there on the conference circuit? Is everyone going to go with the big hitters like Pete Buttigieg instead of a person that can actually attend in person? These are some of the post-COVID questions that are on my mind. So I'm trailing off track here, but something to think about. I'm sure many of you have those same kind of questions, like what happens when, what happens if this is going to happen? Oh, interesting. But back to Pete. I love this new DOT approach and the focus on fix it first and equity and talking about bicycles and active transportation and those types of things. But I do want to have more of these discussions when Tracy and Chrissy are back and when we have some other guests, which, by the way, I tried to get some guests on for some popular topics, some particular topics, but they were busy, so we weren't able to pull it off this week. But hopefully soon we'll be able to get somebody to talk about some of these big topics that are happening around the country. There's just so much going on and so much intense, issue action going on, especially with the transportation bill. There's stuff going on in Houston that we're going to talk about briefly in a second. So I'm trying to work on getting some subject matter experts for you all to try to listen in, so you don't have to listen to me all the time. I know you like to listen to me from time to time, but I know you like co-hosts as well, and I do as well, because it makes my life a little bit easier, but also more fun because I love having the folks here and chatting with them. So coming soon, more folks. But this is episode number 85. Shut-ins Anonymous 101 is in session. Before we get to the show, I want to let folks know, as always, that you can get this podcast wherever you find your podcasts, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, and of course, Apple Podcasts. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and subscribing means you get both Mondays at the Overhead Wire, this show, and Talking Headways on the same feed. 2 fun podcasts, 1 great channel. And thanks to folks that subscribe through the podcatchers. It's awesome that you keep on coming back to the show each week. I'm not the biggest promotional person generally, but we really do appreciate it. So, thank you for that a ton. Okay, well, let's get to the news, shall we? So these are some of the stories that piqued our interest from the newsletter over the last few weeks. Hopefully informative. Here's what we've got. And just a reminder for folks, I know you all who are listening to this have probably heard me a million times, but this all comes from the newsletter, the daily newsletter, which is basically how I can do all these podcasts along with the Patreon. My newsletter subscriptions are how I keep on doing, collecting the news and giving it out to people that the way we do. So, we go through about 1,500 news items every single day, and we pull out the 30 we think are the most interesting. We send them out every morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 4 a.m. Pacific, and we have an archive of over 72,000 links tagged by topic and city from all of these topic areas. So this is where we get them. These are the popular articles. These are the ones that people click on the most and are most interested in. This one in particular, we talked about a little bit, a couple of weeks ago. I think we talked about this, not the last time, but maybe the time before that, where Houston is having a big freeway fight. And we talked about how they're basically approved themselves to build the freeway, I-45 through downtown. And but you can't approve yourself for those types of things, for the environmental impact statement, for whether it was going to be impacting a specific type of person. We talked about this a little bit a while ago, but I wanted to kind of circle back because some big stuff has happened. Harris County, home to the city of Houston, has sued the Texas Department of Transportation over freeway expansions through downtown that would displace more than 1,000 homes as well as businesses and parkland. In the wake of the lawsuit, the Federal Highway Administration announced that it would ask TXDOT to halt any work on the project until they can review concerns about civil rights violations under Title VI. So, like I said, I don't think we talked about this last time, but we talked about it a couple times ago. And I think I might have talked about this with Yona, who, by the way, is coming on this Thursday on the Talking Headways podcast for his annual review show. We're excited about that. But we talked a little bit about freeways versus the discussion about transit. It's kind of silly that we have these elections and we vote for transit, but we don't have to vote for roads. And then organizations and state DOTs like TXDOT can just say, oh, well, this doesn't have any impact. We're just going to build an extra couple lanes through the downtown and displace tons of people without worrying about it because, well, hey, we're TXDOT. So it's a little bit ridiculous that actually happens. So, but yeah, the county and the Federal Highway Administration under the new administration were telling, TXDOT to slow its roll. And because they have that ridiculousness of being able to self-certify their, environmental documents and stuff, they're starting to look at this as a big deal. And this is a huge deal. I mean, this is something that is going to impact what happens in other cities as well. I mean, we have major expansion plans in places like Austin and Portland, going through the Albina neighborhood. Last week, there was some new news in Portland about, whether the footprint was going to be a certain size or not of the freeway expansion. And for many, months and years, Oregon DOT has been saying that, no, we're not going to expand the footprint by that much. And then documents came out that showed that maybe it did. So we're actually going to have somebody on soon, hopefully, to talk about the Portland freeway stuff. But this Houston stuff, I mean, it kind of gives you an indication of what this DOT, what Pete Buttigieg's shop is actually going to do now, in terms of looking over these things. I don't know if it's able to stop it or if there's going to be a bunch of lawsuits or what happens. I know that, obviously Harris County and Lena Hidalgo, who's the county commissioner there, is the county judge, actually, I should say, going to could sue TXDOT to make sure this doesn't move forward until there's more information and more working with the community. But this is actually big. This is big because of that Austin and Portland situation and other freeways that might be built around, that might displace people. So stay tuned to that. I'm looking forward to hopefully in some point in the future talking with somebody about Houston. Hopefully at some point in the future talking to somebody about Portland, because these are big deals. And especially from this discussion that we've had for such a long time about the way that freeways really bulldoze their way through neighborhoods and change things. So check that out when you get a chance. This article actually was in the Houston Public Media, but also Doug Begley from the Houston Chronicle has been reporting a lot about this as well and has been doing a great job. So we'll be watching this with interest for sure. All right, next up, missing large housing. So Bay Area architect and artist Alfred believes that main streets and commercial corridors are lacking the pedestrians and activity needed to thrive, in part because housing units have become less crowded than they were 100 years ago. To boost those businesses without crowding, Alfred argues we need more density in the form of larger buildings. In other words, in addition to missing middle housing, we need missing large housing. So Alfred is a Bay Area and national treasure, and I wanted to mention this piece first because it ties into, we talk about Yona coming on. We also have MIT's Andres Sevtsuk and it coming in to talk about urban commercial corridors. And actually what Alfred is saying, mirrors kind of what Andres is actually saying in his book about commercial corridors. And, while we were talking, he mentions that, not a lot of planning programs talk about urban commercial corridors and clusters and stores. And so it's really interesting that Alfred put this out there, because there's so much discussion about, we want really vibrant retail. We want really urban stores. We don't want the big boxes and stuff. But the reason why we get those big boxes and we don't get the urban stores is because the catchment areas for stores are such that you need so many people to be able to provide those stores with a customer base. And so, there's a whole book that Andres wrote about this that we recorded the podcast on Thursday. I'm excited to share it with you all. But Alfred wrote this really interesting piece that, kind of mirrors some of the points that Andres made. And obviously, Alfred has some wonderful pictures. He draws so well. He's done some really cool projects thinking about what you could do if you stacked old BART cars on each other and things like that. So, Alfred basically is saying that we don't necessarily need we need to have more units because the population inside of housing units is changing. You might have had 4 people to a house before, and now you might only have 2. And so that actually, even though there's the same amount of like building density, there's less amount of people density. And so we need more housing units and buildings to kind of fill in the gaps there. So really interesting topic, super interesting to think about. And while we're talking about this, I appreciate all those cities that are looking to allow parcels to have more than one single unit on them. Obviously, we're talking about getting rid of single-family zoning in places like Sacramento. In Minneapolis, there was a discussion about that, obviously, because of the changes to their long-range plan. Charlotte is having a big discussion right now. They actually are pausing the vote and pushing it back a little bit, having more discussion because people are really freaked out about getting rid of single-family zoning. So we don't just need to kind of get rid of that single-family zoning kind of construct. We need to get rid of the idea that only small buildings can go in certain parts of the city. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a need for smaller buildings. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be able to create a situation where you have a Hong Kong everywhere. That's silly. Or even, a Manhattan for that example. I know that people decry the Manhattanization of places, et cetera, which is dumb. But we can have, duplexes and fourplexes and sixplexes and multi-unit buildings and have buildings that are tall in the corner. One of my favorite building kind of types and kind of juxtapositions is when you go to the Painted Ladies in San Francisco. You see those, houses that are those Victorian houses that are painted brilliantly, and they, you have this view of the city skyline and City Hall and all that stuff in San Francisco. You have downtown and all of the new buildings that are down. It's interesting and it's fun and it's cool and it reminds you of Full House and all that stuff. But then, they never take a picture of that building on the right that's like 6 to 8 stories. So there's a building there that shows what actually, the urban fabric is actually like, rather than this kind of made up fairy tale version of it that we always think about. So something to think about is Alfred's missing large housing. Something that can actually help us, grow the commercial streets and the organizations that we want to grow. All right. Yeah. Ooh. So next up is the urban river swimming renaissance. Cities around the world are cleaning up their rivers and opening them to swimmers. To make rivers safe, cities need to make sure that the water doesn't pose any health risks and the swimming areas are clear of debris. From pop-up swimming pools in Brussels to designs for giant river strainer pool in Manhattan, these urban blue spaces and the plans for more are overwhelmingly popular. Okay, so when I first thought of this article, when I first read this article, I instantly went to that Seinfeld episode where Kramer does laps in the East River and then sleeps in Elaine's bed and makes it stink to high heaven, and then it's unusable, so she has to get rid of it. But these days, river swimming is becoming a little bit more commonplace, I think, and a little bit more fun. I remember going down to the river summer camp for Boy Scouts when I was younger, and we had a blast in the summer going through the Blanco River in Texas, which is a beautiful river. It's spring-fed, very clear, an amazing experience. And I can only imagine what it would be like if you actually have this same experience in a city river. Obviously, years of environmental damage have happened because of dumping and the factories and things that have plagued urban rivers for a long time. But if we could fix that, that'd be really amazing. And I think that people would really appreciate it. I know that this is actually taking off in a number of different cities. I know in Paris and the Seine, River. There's actually swimming now in there. So if you want to go down there on a hot day and take your lunch break, take a dunk, people really enjoy that. So perhaps it's not for everybody, but it really sounds good to me. I'd love to see more urban rivers get kind of revitalized and cleaned up so that people can swim, because it's such a cleansing and nice experience to go and swim in a river. It's really awesome. Okay. Again, on the environmental front, we have a crisis of sand. And I might have talked about this before because I think it's just a fascinating topic. But sand as a construction material is used in everything from concrete to glass to silicon chips. But we aren't sure how much supply we have and whether we're going to run out of the material soon, because it's not measured or monitored like other commodities. The mining of sand is also creating a human crisis in countries including India, where mafias have control over the mining process and limited regulations lead to environmental damage. So I've been reading more and more lately about this sand shortage, and we think there's a large amount of it, obviously, because there's so many deserts and stuff out there. There's the Sahara Desert. There's all the deserts in the Middle East, which are actually driving the demand for sand. Places like the United Arab Emirates, places that are Dubai, places that are building massive amounts of buildings. But when the sand is in the desert, the particles become round because the winds whip them around and they start to kind of, like in a river when you see those rounded boulders and rounded, pebbles, because they've started rolling on each other when the water gets high and they start to scrape each other over time. The same thing happens with sand. And so it doesn't work in concrete as well, because you don't have those jagged pieces found in riverbeds and beaches and on the seafloor where you get this jagged sand, and you need the friction of that sand type to make concrete strong. So, this is like what I said before, the United Arab Emirates is actually importing sand from places like Canada and Australia to build their buildings. And, it would really be a huge win if somebody could figure out how to make sand work like coarse sand, how to make round sand work like coarse sand. And, the reason why it's such a big problem is, like I mentioned, we have no idea how much this resource is being mined. There are sand mafias in India. There are environmental damages happening in Southeast Asia to dig up all the sand to feed this need for concrete. I think it's something that needs a little bit more attention, but it's been getting not very much, because it's just such a strange kind of esoteric topic. Everybody thinks, oh, we have enough sand, but we actually don't when it comes to, concrete and those things. And then also the creation and construction of concrete and kilns and all that stuff for lime and making, the cement. That's a whole other environmental issue that hopefully we can tackle before, 2050. Climate change is such a big, important factor in all the decisions that we're making. And we want to build all these new things like high-speed rail lines and new buildings and new, construction of streets and roads and redevelopment of those things. And that's actually a big issue, because, even though that the concrete, even if we reduce our use of concrete, it's still very environmentally damaging. It's something that really is a huge kind of, carbon creator out there. So, something to think about. Also, fun fact from this Deutsche Welle article, China made more cement from 2011 to 2014 than the U.S. did in the last century. I'm not sure where they get that information from, but that sounds really crazy. Let that sink in a bit, because that kind of gives you an idea of how much things have changed in China over the last 2 decades, even since 2000, when they started this massive construction and change. It's just been really crazy, and it's only going to get more and more because of the needs of the country and needs of construction. So it's interesting to think about that for sure. So think about sand. There's so much stuff going on that we learn about every day, and I just wanted to bring this to the forefront because it's been popping up over and over in my National Geographic and in my articles, etc. And people seem to kind of miss it, but it's coming to the forefront now. And now for something completely different. So the question is, should we wear reflective vests so that AVs can see us? No. And a quote from Zach Furness of Penn State in the Tree Hugger article where I got this from: imagine being so hypnotized by techno bullshit discourses that you lack the basic ability to view human beings, not cars, as those with the real right to the city. And this has been something completely different. And finally, cities could lose metro status. A committee of representatives and federal statistical agencies recently made recommendations to move the limit for the designation of Metropolitan Statistical Area, or MSA, to 100,000 people from 50,000. However, many of the cities that would be made micropolitan are worried that they will miss out on federal support due to reduced statuses. So this is kind of dumb. They're doing it, they say, for statistical purposes at the federal level, and it won't affect funding formulas. But these kind of funding formulas have been written into law with the term metropolitan area in mind. By changing the status, you're making it so that all the legal language needs to be changed. And we have this, I actually thought about this, we have this like Y2K situation. Back in Y2K, the whole reason why Y2K was so crazy is because instead of using 4-digit years, they were using 2-digit years. So when they, when you go into the next 2000, next century, you have to worry about these bank codes messing up because of Y2K, which ended up not happening a lot. It's a whole funny topic also in that movie Office Space, but it makes me think of that, like all these documents, these legal documents, all this stuff that has formula funds, et cetera, going to metropolitan areas. Maybe I'm just overstating it a little bit, but that would have to change because all these formula, they say it's not going to change, but it would change. But also you see these rural areas that don't want this to change either because it means that they'll have more fights over resources as well. And it seems like, as always, with the sand and freeway expansion or whatever, it always seems like it's a fight over resources, which is really crazy. So that's the items for today. I had a few that I wanted to kind of chat about in short detail. Obviously, we don't have a co-host today, but I thought those were pieces that you all might be interested in responding to. As always, give me an email, theoverheadwire@gmail.com. If you want to comment on any of these, send me notes. If you want to have input or actually have me read something on the air, we really appreciate that. But that's it. But that's it for today for the articles. So I hope that some of those things kind of have put a pin in the map in your mind for coming up. I don't know. I can't get words out of my mouth today. For some reason, it's kind of going slower than maybe last week. But I'm always excited to talk about this stuff. It's super exciting. There's so much going on. So anyways, this week and every week, I want to thank our generous Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome and keep the show going by listening and supporting each month. This show and Talking Headways really wouldn't be here without you, so thank you very much. And you can support the show by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. We've had people sign up each month during the pandemic, so we're super appreciative of that. $2 a month will get you some stickers and a handwritten note, and $10 a month will get you our bus-only scarf. And the bus-only scarf is back. So if you want one of our bus-only scarves, you can get one in addition to being a $10 a month supporter on Patreon. You can go to the overheadwire.com and get one there, and we'll send it along as soon as we put it into the mailbox at the post office. I try to get those out as fast as possible. The day that I get the order, I put it in the package and try to get to the post office as soon as I can. So we'll send those out. Also, I want to mention that we did produce an audiobook version of Raymond Unwin's 1909 classic, Town Planning and Practice. If you want to get your hands on one, go to raymondunwin.com. The book was super fun. The fun was super booked to produce. Sometimes I'm wondering if I'm just talking too fast because I'm so excited. I think I do that. I have this, one time I was giving a guest lecture in one of my old professor's classes at the University of Texas in Austin at the planning school. Professor Ming Zhang, wonderful person and wonderful guy, actually asked me back to give a lecture on TOD a number of years ago, and I did so, but I had like 90 slides, and I think I had like 40 minutes or something like that to give a talk, 45 minutes maybe. And so I went and I talked so fast because I was so excited about what I was sharing. And Professor Zhang came up to me afterwards. He was like, "Jeff, I appreciate your enthusiasm. However, you might have been talking a little bit too fast for some of the international students." And I felt so horrible. So I feel sometimes that same kind of pressure here where I get so excited about stuff and I talk really, really fast. So I apologize if that bothers anybody. Obviously, if it does, I imagine that you're probably not listening anymore to my podcast. But it's just something I think about every time I start getting going. So the book was fun to produce, and if you're a history of planning fan, it's the first one listed in the American Planning Association 100 Essential Books of Planning. So raymondunwin.com, check that book out. It was really fun to make, and I hope folks really like it. It's a classic, and there's really a lot of things you can learn from then that can be taken to building towns now. All right, listener questions and comments. So I had a couple of folks write last time checking in to see how I was doing. Hopefully it didn't seem like I was too down, but those days during the pandemic come and go. So I had the commentary at the beginning, which might have sounded like I was a little down, but I just wanted to make sure to let folks know that, I feel the same way that a lot of you feel. At the same time, I know that we're going through a tough time, and, we have those days, and it's okay to have those days. And I just want to let folks know that. So thank you so much for those who wrote in and checked up on me. And I always love hearing from people, whether it's on, email or Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever. If you, want to get in touch for anything, anytime, feel free to do so, and I'll try to get back in a reasonable fashion. And I appreciate those who stay in touch and listen to the show and like to have that dialogue going. So appreciate that. So Puppies and Butterflies, this is the part of the show where we talk about something fun, interesting, or maybe it just didn't fit in other sections. So, this last week I don't think we're running out of television shows to watch, but we started watching some Gravity Falls, which was a Disney XD show. I think it's only like 2 seasons, but it lasted for about 4 years. And we're enjoying that at the moment. And we've mostly been sticking to comedies through the pandemic. I can't watch that serious stuff. I can't watch all the true crime and the horror and those types of things. There's so much real stuff going on in the world, at the moment, and that's just such a bummer. So comedies it is for me. But during the pandemic, we've gone through Parks and Recreation, Goldberg's, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Ted Lasso. We did Dollface on Hulu. We've watched a lot of shows all the way through. I'm wondering what you all have been watching, if you watched anything all the way through during the pandemic. It's been quite a time to, there's not much else going on if you can't go out. So obviously got to sit. And not like I didn't watch TV before, but I don't think I've watched this much TV ever before. Sports have been keeping me going, but yeah, there's the good comedies on. And those shows have all been really funny. I'm sure we've done a lot more, but those are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. But, and we also recently watched Palm Springs on Hulu. It's kind of like a Groundhog Day situation, but I really like, from watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine, we really like the Andy Samberg, stuff. So, that was an interesting take on the kind of the Groundhog Day, movie with Bill Murray, but in a more modern, context. And it makes me wonder, like, what would you do if you had to live the same day over and over again? I don't know. I might not, I might not do the same thing every day. I'd probably do something different every day, maybe learn something or other, or try to figure out. I mean, you're living your life, but you just wake up in the same place every day and then go throughout life, and then it starts over again for everybody else, but your brain stays intact. So you remember everything. And so, I think I would probably just try to learn as much as possible. That would be really awesome. And then try to figure out what I could learn. That'd be awesome. So anyways, if you have some ideas about what you'd do if you had the same day over and over again, I'd love to hear from you, and send some suggestions. We always like to hear folks' ideas for television shows, movies, anything you're interested in doing. I still think we should have a movie watch party or something about Singles, that movie from the 90s that where the main character is a transit. He's trying to build a commuter train between Tacoma and Seattle, and I think that would be kind of fun to watch with a bunch of people, or at least do a commentary track or something with folks. So let me know if that's of interest. Also, I sent this out to my Patreon supporters, and I think that this might be something that we might do. But, Carol Martins was on the show this week, and we got a lot of great feedback about the show. People really appreciating the philosophy behind the idea of access. And, I really had fun reading the book and doing the show. But I also recorded for like 2 hours, and I only got like an hour of show in, and we had all this extra material that couldn't quite make a new podcast episode, but it was enough for maybe some bonus materials or something like that. So I asked folks on Patreon if they wanted to have some bonus materials put on their Patreon as kind of a extra for members, and I had some positive responses. So maybe I'll do that actually. So another plug, I guess, for Patreon. If you want to become a Patreon member, we might be doing some more bonus materials lately with some podcast extras, some bonus materials that we edit out, because we do edit the podcast pretty heavily. So maybe that's something we can do. All right. So you can find me online on Twitter at The Overhead Wire or at theoverheadwire.com. You can find the podcast wherever on your social sites, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, as well as Twitter. We post them everywhere. Thank you so much for joining us at Mondays at The Overhead Wire. Thanks to our generous Patreon supporters for sponsoring this week's podcast. And we will see you next time.